Good afternoon, or good evening, I should say. It's 6:02 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I had plenty of fish. I just didn't.
Could we call the roll, please?
Schmuckel.
Here.
Jewell.
Here.
Augustinelli.
Here.
McCumber.
Here.
Korn.
Here.
And it's noted that McManus and Barchef are absent and excused.
That is correct, thank you. First order of business is a public comment. If any member of the public would care to address the board, please come to the podium, and if you'd be so kind as to give us your name and address. All right. We will close public comment and come back to the board for review and approval of the agenda and statements of conflicts of interest.
I had a Parks and Rec meeting last week, and can I just report on that under the Parks and Rec report? Under
Sure.
reports? Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion. We approve the agenda as listed.
Support.
We have a motion and support to approve the agenda. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next is the consent calendar.
And it's a doozy. The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with in one board motion without discussion. Any member of the board, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single board action adopting the consent calendar. Minutes, May 23rd, 2023, regular meeting, recommend approval. Bills from the general fund, $484,204.62. From Gordy Frazier Developers Escrow Fund, Stormwater Reviews, Utility Plan Reviews, Oversight and Closeout, $53,298.84. General Utilities, $62,480. And Park Funds DNR Trust, $2,480. For a total of $118,258.84. Recommend approval. MTT update, receive and file. Consideration of proposed new road name of January Drive. Recommend approval. Consideration of nominating Tim Hughes to serve another 3-year term on the Traverse City and Garfield Township Recreational Authority Board. Recommend approval. Consideration of renewal of public access and government access television contract with Leah. Recommend approval. Consideration of donating $3,500 to Boom Boom Club for Independence Day fireworks. Recommend approval. Motion to introduce and set public hearing for July 11th, 2023 for Olson PUD major amendment. Recommend approval. Consideration of contractors change order number 1 to Elmer's for Cedar Run water main extension. Consideration of contractor's application for payment number 2 to Elmer's for Cedar Run water main extension. Consideration of contractor's application for payment number 2 to Walton Contracting Incorporated for River East Recreation Area Improvements, Phase 2. Recommend approval. Consideration of Resolution 2023-08-TA, second amended and restated ordinance number 18, payment in lieu of taxes. Recommend approval. Consideration of Resolution 2023-09-TA regarding tax exemption and payment in lieu of taxes for the flats at Carriage Commons. Recommend approval. In consideration of Resolution 2023-10-TA regarding tax exemption and payment in lieu of taxes for Hammond Road Apartments. Recommend approval.
Is there any member of the board who would like to remove anything from the consent calendar for discussion? Any member of the public or staff? I would like to remove something. The item G, the contribution to the Boom Boom Club. There are no other requests.
I'll make a motion. We approve the consent calendar with the exception of 3G.
Support.
Motion and support. Are there any questions or comments? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Dool,
Yes.
McCumber,
Yes.
Schmuckel,
Yes.
Augustinelli,
Yes.
and Corn.
Yes.
Augustinelli seconded that, just so you have it on record.
The items are removed from the consent calendar. Item G, the Boom Boom Club. When I was going through the agenda, getting ready for today's meeting, I realized we've been donating $3,500 for about 10 years now. And the price of everything has gone up. And the county and the city recently found out they cannot donate. So I would like to increase that amount from 3,500 to maybe 4,500?
How about 5,000?
That's what I was thinking.
All right.
Denise, make
Is
the
that,
motion.
is that a
I make a
motion?
motion.
I think that was a motion in support.
Sure,
It was a motion in support to do $5,000 to the Boom Boom Club.
support.
There we go. Are there any questions or comments? All right. And a roll call vote, please.
Schmuckel,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
McCumber,
Yes.
Augustinelli,
Yes.
Corn.
Yes. And the motion passes unanimously.
There you go.
We move on to correspondence, and it's a quiet day for correspondence. Go right to reports, the county commissioners report.
Good evening, everyone. Brad Jewett, Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners, District 4. I want to thank you for going through the consent calendar quite fast, because I do have to go to Blair tonight, so I do appreciate that. But not a whole lot going on at the moment, but we do have some key things here. We have been talking about a regional mental health facility, and we will be having more discussions on that next Wednesday at our board meeting. I don't know the details on it yet, but that is going to be on our agenda next week. At the end of the month here on the 28th, we do have a study session to go over some preliminary results of the facilities master plan that is currently being conducted. Last week here, we did sign or authorized to sign a contract with Benzie County Jail to house any of our overflow type inmates for $35 a day. The airport, which is not really a county thing anymore, but it affects our whole region, but their fire service is going to be heading in a private direction, it looks like, at least interim and stuff, because the city is no longer going to be providing their services after mid-July, is it? Mid-June?
They're out till mid-August now.
Or mid-August, okay. So anyway, that is a service that they are looking to keep going, which they need to. Our last meeting of May, we did obligate our first ARPA dollars, and that was to one of the pavilions request. This next week, we will have several more on there that we will be able to obligate the funding to. I don't have that list yet, and we've not confirmed it, so I just soon not throw any ideas out there on who it might be. One thing that all of us have heard a lot about lately is the roadkill, and I do want to let you know that our administration has been working with disposal services on getting prices, and working with the road commission and working with the state to try and come to some kind of resolution on this and everything. I will say I was at a conference last week down in Troy, and about every quarter mile on I-75 was a dead deer, so we are not the only ones. Then the last thing I have on my list is last week we did approve for the 17 properties that require lawn services within the county here. We did approve new contracts with Johnson Outdoors, and it used to be, I did miss a meeting, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say it was like $57,000 or $58,000 before, and now it is over $150,000 to provide those services. So there was a drastic increase, but nobody else bid it, and the ones that said if they did bid it, they would be significantly more than that. So rest assured though, our lawns and everything will still be taken care of, but it is costing us all more money than it once did. So with that being said, that is all I have on my list tonight, which as of this morning, I thought, man, I only got one or two things, but it definitely grew throughout the day as I started thinking. But does anybody have any questions or comments, concerns, anything?
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to bail out of here and head to Blair, and if we have a meeting at the end of the month, I'll be here for the whole meeting. But If anybody needs to get a hold of me, my contact information is on the website. Like always, feel free to reach out. Just give me a short time to get back to you if I can't answer right away. So thanks, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Brad, you too.
Thanks, Brad.
Next item is the sheriff's report, and our lieutenant is away getting educated, so we have no sheriff's report tonight. We'll go right to the GT Metro Fire report.
Good evening, Garfield Board, Pat Parker, Metro Fire Chief. In your packets are our statistics for the month of May, and there's two sets of statistics. One is Metro as a whole and just Garfield from those statistics. So for the month of May, we ran 470 calls, and again, medical leads those by 323. Of the calls in Garfield Township that are EMS, we have 235 of those are medical in Garfield Township, and we have that broken down between priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3. So again, about half of our calls are priority 1s, and about half our calls are priority 3s. Also included in the packet are pie charts showing the calls by station and also calls by township. Are there any questions with that? Okay. Just some highlights that's happening. We met with the Finance Committee yesterday, and we think that we have a budget for next year. We're not asking for a millage increase, so that's good. We have been trained up a couple people on the Run, Hide, Fight program, so that's going to be available to townships and to our citizens, and that's for surviving an active threat. So it's a whole program on that, and it can be taught in an 8-hour day if you want a certificate, or we can teach it in a couple-hour block, and it's just talking to people how you can survive, pretty much a shooting scenario. We had 3 new recruits graduate from fire school, and they turn around, jump right back into EMT school, so they'll be out of school this fall. We're excited to have those 3, and we look forward to having them off probation and able to work part-time shifts. We did lose a firefighter, unfortunately, to city fire, and we also just replaced Weston with another person who is from the Brimley area. He's excited coming down here. We are busy training this past month in hazmat elevator operations, which is very interesting. What do you do when you have someone stuck in an elevator? And so we did some training in some of our hotels on that. Critical incident stress, building construction, and marine operations. We're out there in the bay in our boat doing some rescues, and I can tell you what, the waters in our 3 townships are very cold yet. We have some people in rope rescue, structural collapse training, and 3 people went to the Homeland Security Conference. In our fire prevention bureau, Brian and his staff are busy with the hotels, motels, public assembly, commercial cooking operations to get prepared for the summer. We're still down an inspector investigator since December of last year. We've put it out a couple of times. We've tested a couple of times, and none of the candidates could pass the exam. So we take another look at that, and we have this same position open until the 18th. So we're hoping, and we have, I think, 4 candidates now that have applied. So we're excited about getting that person on and out there inspecting our close to 3,000 occupancies that we have in our 3 townships. Brian's been busy for the month of May with some fire cause and origin. We had a single-family dwelling in Garfield that was incendiary, and we also had one in Acme that was incendiary, which means we suspect arson. We had 2 multifamily structures in Garfield that were cooking fires. We had a single-family residence in Garfield that was an accidental heat lamp, and another one in Acme that was an appliance malfunction. So our investigator's been busy with those. Jen's been busy with her car seat programs, and you can see that falls still lead our department in the number of EMS calls that we go on. So she is actually out with two programs right now. One is a program called Small Steps that we're into the adult foster care homes in the area and teaching not only the staff, but we're also teaching the patients on how not to fall and some of the things that we can do to prevent that. And then she also has an 8-week program at the YMCA called Matter of Balance. And we're getting rave reviews on that with primarily some of our elderly citizens on how they can improve their balance and not fall, and if you do fall, how they can get up on their own and not have to call emergency services. So that's been going over extremely well. So that's pretty much my report, unless anybody has any questions.
Were you guys involved in the big fire up north?
We were not, no, and no one from here went over there. We were actually surprised. We didn't call anybody in, but we were on standby, just kind of preparing. But nope, that's big in the U.S. Forest area and the DNR, so they pretty much handle that themselves with all the local Crawford County, Roscommon County fire departments. But this rain has been a godsend because it is really dry.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your support.
Thanks, Pat.
Next, the Grand Traverse County Road Commission report.
Good evening. I'm Alan Lehman, your representative on the Road Commission. I have a few things on my list tonight. One of them is to tell you we awarded a bid to Elmer's for the Silver Lake Road and Airport intersection that we talked about last month. New lights, longer turning queue, scheduled for later in the summer. I think it could be even as late as after Labor Day, but it's going to be late, well after the Cherry Festival. But that is going to happen this year. Came in a little over budget, but it's a particularly troublesome corner, so we decided there was enough money in the budget and approved that. The second thing is I did talk to engineering about the Zimmerman Road issue that was brought up last month, and it's going to take a while for to have a study or something to be done to look at that. But I made them aware of it, your request for that, and one of the problems that come up is because there's a number of properties, small properties with just like standard sized lots along there. There's going to be some issues if we want to expand the lanes in there with right-of-way taking, and people are not always excited about losing some of their front yard. So my suggestion to engineering was perhaps we could curb that and keep it within the existing right-of-way, but then we have the stormwater issues to deal with along the curb. So that's something they'll look at, but I suspect that'll take some time, but getting it on the radar is a good first start, and I appreciated that last month. Brad already spoke about the roadkill. It's statewide. Our guys have been, really after it, but right now we're not doing anything with roadkill. We're not picking them up. And then finally, I have a conflict on your first meeting of the month, and I'd like to know if the road commission reports could be the second meeting of the month, if I could be on the agenda for that every month, if that would be okay. And if you don't want to see me, Chuck, you can just send a little note. Stay away. But otherwise, if I could come and speak to you, you can bring any concerns to me, and I'll bring them on the second.
We can do that.
Meeting of the month. Okay, and that's all I have. Are there any questions? And Joe McManus is.
I'd like to add something that Alan doesn't know about, we worked on last week. As regards to the project over here with the Silver Lake.
A little closer to the mic.
Oh, here.
Regards here with the project over at Silver Lake, we're gonna try something new. We are gonna direct mail the people that are directly impacted in the area, and then we are going to have a public forum, hopefully a week before the project starts. So we'll bring in the drawings, people can come, they can see what we're gonna do, ask questions. We'll answer to the best of our ability, but we want to try to help the public more informed on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and when it's happening. So just want to and he doesn't know about that. That's something we came up with last week. So we'll be doing that on all of our major projects from now on. This is the first time, so hopefully it'll come across okay. So
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have I had something to add, but I forgot it, so I'll get it to you next month. Thank you.
And the next item is the Planning Department report for June 2023.
Good evening. You have the Planning Department report in your packet. Just wanted to highlight a few things. We have some activity at the Planning Commission. There's a couple public hearings that will be held tomorrow evening. One of them is for Burnley Meadows site condominium, which is a proposal for a 26-lot, single-family residential site condominium. There's also a public hearing tomorrow for the combination of the Ridge 45 phases 1 through 3 and Ridge 45 phase 4, which is formerly known as South 22. So that will be combined for a total of 596 units, of which 400 are already built. The other thing I just wanted to also highlight is we have an introduction tomorrow evening of the Village at Garfield. This is a new 80-unit apartment complex at the northwest corner of Hammond and Garfield. So this is kind of behind the Marathon Station there. It's essentially one of the last pieces of that Lafreniere Trust property, which the other portions were used for the Beta and Housing Commission project. And the other thing I just want to mention, the Planning Commission continues to work on draft goals and objectives as part of the master plan, and we'll be tackling some more of that related this month to housing, economic development, and public safety. That's it.
Any questions for John? Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Parks and Rec report. You're it.
I'm it? Well, I don't do anything about this. We had a meeting on Monday night for Parks and Rec, and I just want to commend the mountain bike group subcommittee. They had a work bee that went on, and they Chris said that they had like 40 people there, and just to clean up things, and it went really, really well, and they wanted to do more. I mean, they were all excited to go and do more, but he said, calm down, this is just the first stage, so. And then the other thing is I was approached by Dan Walters he wants to erect a flagpole at Silver Lake Park, and I took it to the committee, to the Recreation Commission, and they said that it was okay with them, and now I'm bringing it back to the board. It would be no cost to us. He's going to put it up himself and take care of it.
Do you know where he was thinking?
I do not know that. I'm sorry. I do not know that. He said that someone goes out every 4th of July and does a makeshift flag ceremony out there, and he just wanted to have it a permanent one out there.
Just might want to just find out where,
Okay.
you know, because we've got that, can't have it in the middle of the field where they're doing sports and that kind of stuff, so.
If I remember right, but I'm not 100% sure, it's by one of the pavilions.
Probably up.
Yeah.
Might find out.
Maybe gather a little more information and bring it back for the next meeting?
Absolutely, I will. Thank you very
Put
much.
it on the agenda.
Okay.
Then the other thing I was just thinking is, are they gonna wanna light it up at night?
Right.
Which might be if it's next to a building, it's easy, the power's right there, but,
Some really nice little solar units that go on top of the pole now, too.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
yeah, yep. Oh, thank Dan Walters.
He likes that park.
Yeah.
Next, the clerk's report is in writing. Our clerk is in Detroit attending a statewide clerks conference about how everybody's going to meet the election requirements next year. It's going to be, you have to have open voting for 9 days before the election.
9 days.
9 days.
9 days straight?
Yep, which
Wow.
is like 2 Sundays. And they're talking about doing county-wide, where everybody logs onto a machine and does it, and then it prints out a ballot. But they're not exactly sure of the mechanics, so it's part of our Constitution now.
So we would have to have staff here on Saturdays, Friday, Saturdays, and Sunday prior to.
It's hoped that using these machines, we will be able to just put in someone's address and it'll issue the right ballot, and it could be anywhere in the county. So
Oh,
they would,
okay.
ideally, they'll be able to use, 2 or 3 places where anyone can go during that 9-day period.
And they can use a Dropbox to bring it back, 9 days, rather than have personnel accepting ballots.
That is, I think that once they do them, they put them through the machine. They go into the machine and they're locked.
Oh. That way you have to have personnel.
Yeah, there has to be personnel.
What about identification? I mean,
Yeah, that's, all the normal things are gonna apply, and you have to have,
so you'll have to have
you have to
somebody,
essentially have 3 people on duty
okay,
for that 9 days. So you has to be, one is basically the precinct captain, and then there has to be one of each opposing party. So,
well,
yeah,
interesting.
they're having fun talking about that one.
I bet
So
they
a
are.
question on that, will they be registering their vote within their precinct? So we will need to set up for every precinct that way? Or is there gonna be one location where they can come and,
So we will issue absentee ballots to all the permanent
Mhm.
absentee ballot people. So those ballots will already be prepared, but they will be able to duplicate them through this electronic process, is what they're hoping. I don't know. That's what the conversation is about. How do you get there? How do you keep it safe? And how do you man it? So,
Quite interesting.
oh, good.
I'm sure we'll hear more when Lenny gets back.
I'm sure we will.
Last is the supervisor's report. We have started moving closer to our metropolitan planning organization. There's a discussion going on right now in terms of how the costs will be shared. There's a local match, and how the voting will be done. So there's some chest thumping going on. Some people want to, run it. Other people just want to be there. So, but at the end of the day, I think that connecting the shares of the local match with the votes will probably make it work out fairly well. So that's going on. Went to the Northern Lower Michigan Traffic Safety Committee meeting last week. That was in Kalkaska, and it was basically all over northern Michigan. And it was a legislative session, but the only legislator who showed up was John Roth. But he was very talkative. They had a lot of presentations. It was interesting. There's a lot of things I didn't know. One of them is that there really is no way to tell how high somebody is who has marijuana in their system. So people who smoke a lot will show a high level of marijuana, but they're not necessarily stoned. Their reactions are not affected. But somebody who doesn't could show a lower amount and be totally incapable of driving. And there's no, like, going into court with a blood test just doesn't, so there's still a lot of questions about how you're going to enforce and when is impaired. We had a little dust up. The Kensington project, which is right next to Carson Square, just off South Airport Road, we had a new developer come in and build out the sidewalks that were required so that they can continue building and selling the condos. They're going quite well until people come in to look at it, and they look across the street and want to know what the deal is with Carson Square, since people have their sofas out on the lawn, wooden cabinets. I mean, it's kind of so we're trying to work with Goodwill, who owns the property, who is the landlord, to get them to get the people who are running it to, do things correctly, rather than going to war and writing tickets and so forth. So that's going fairly well, I think. We've had positive response. And then a lot of time on water and sewer lately, which you'll hear more about soon. Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
And we will move on to unfinished business, and we have no unfinished business. On to new business, and item A is a public hearing on consideration of Hickory Properties PR rezoning, Resolution 2023-17-T. John?
Yes, this is a application from the Joint Rec Authority to rezone a parcel which they're identifying as the Hickory Forest parcel, which has access off of Barney Road. And this is about a 70-acre parcel which they're rezoning from agricultural to Parks and Recreation District. And when they approached the planning department, we suggested that they also include the 3 Hickory Meadows properties so that those would also be rezoned to Parks and Rec District so that it's consistent through that area along with the Hickory Hills. So this is actually was expanded to include the Hickory Forest parcel and then the 3 Hickory Meadows parcels to rezone those to the Parks and Rec District. It was introduced back to the Planning Commission back in March. They did hold a public hearing and adopted a findings of fact on May 10th, 2023, and recommended approval to the Township Board.
Are there any questions or comments before I open the public hearing? All right. Then at this point, I would ask any member of the public who would care to speak to this resolution to please come to the podium, and if you'd be so kind as to give us your name and address. All right. See everybody shaking their head no, so I'm going to close the public hearing and come back to the board for a motion.
I'll run through them.
All right.
I'll make a motion that the Planning Commission's recommended findings of fact for the application Z-2023-01 as provided in PD Report 2023-63 and forming part of this motion be adopted.
Support.
We have a motion and support to adopt the findings of fact as presented. Are there any questions or comments? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Schmuckel.
Yes.
McCumber.
Yes.
Augustinelli.
Yes.
Corn.
Yes.
And I'll make a motion that the application Z-2023-01 submitted by the City of Traverse City and the Charter Township of Garfield Recreational Authority to rezone partial 05-005-050-10 from its current zoning of the A-agricultural zoning district to the P-R Park and Recreational zoning district, and to rezone parcels 05-004-003-60, comma, 05-005-034-10, and 05-005-034-20 from their current zoning of the R-1 one-family residential zoning district to the P-R Park and Recreational zoning district, and constituting amendment number 35 to Garfield Township's ordinance number 68 be approved based upon the adopted findings of facts and for the reasons set forth in the PD Report 2023-63.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Are there any questions? All right. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Duel.
Yes.
Schmuckel.
Yes.
Augustinelli.
Yes.
McCumber.
Yes.
Corn.
Yes.
And then one more.
Yes, it is.
Motion that resolution 2023-17-T for adopting amendment number 35 to Garfield Township ordinance number 68, rezoning parcel 05-005-050-10 from its current zoning of the A-agricultural zoning district to the P-R Parks and Recreational zoning district, and rezoning parcels 05-004-003-60 and 05-005-034-10 and 05-005-034-20 from their current zoning of the R1 one-family residential zoning district to the P-R Parks and Recreational zoning district be adopted.
Support.
We have a motion and support to adopt adopt resolution number 2023-17-T as presented. there any questions or comments? A roll call vote, please.
Jewel,
Yes.
Schmuckel,
Yes.
McCumber,
Yes.
Augustinelli,
Yes.
Horn.
Yes. And thank you. We'll move on to item B, consideration of a new rate structure for sewer and water.
Good evening. I'm sorry the technology isn't working tonight, so we'll get by, but we had to print
Hey,
these
Matt.
out.
Bye, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Thank you all. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for having me present tonight. My name is Dawn Lund. I'm Vice President of Utility Financial Solutions, and our firm conducts cost of service studies, financial plans, and rate designs for utilities across the country, Guam, and the Caribbean. Again, I apologize. I had a presentation tonight. The technology doesn't seem to be working, so we printed these out. I'm simply going to walk right through this so you can flip the pages as I go, but we'll get through it together. So I'm going to talk tonight about water and sewer rates. We conducted a financial projection analysis and a cost of service study. I'm going to talk about key financial targets. I'm going to show you where you are today financially in each utility, and where we believe you should be moving into the future. I do want to just mention that each fund, water and wastewater separately, are enterprise funds. And what that means is each enterprise fund should be able to sustain its own expenses, its own capital for reinvestment, and its own debt. So basically, we want to make sure that we are cash flowing enough from operations in order to meet its own expenses. So I'm going to start with the water utility. And what you're going to see is a table. It's a very highly summarized table of about 100 spreadsheets. So although this table looks very simple, it's a roll-up of a lot of financial analysis that goes into this. And the key focus that I'm going to talk about today are the middle of the table, the adjusted operating income number, the column next to that, the projected cash balances, and the last column, the debt coverage ratio. I want to tell you why each of these are important to meet, and if you're meeting them, and how we plan to hopefully get you there. As you can see, in the water department, you're currently operating at losses. That means your expenses in that department exceed the revenues that you're taking in for the water utility. Without any rate adjustments, you see that the losses continue to grow. That's that middle column. The next column to that is the cash balance. I do look at 4 risk areas to the utility to determine what the minimum I want the utility to hold in cash. I look at O&M expense. I simply want you to be able to pay your bills. As your bills come in, I want you to be able to pay them. I look at the historical investment you have in the system. If you were to have a main break, equipment failure, whatever it may be, I want you to have cash available to get the system up and running, to keep providing service to your customers. I also look at debt service payments. Currently, in the water department, you do not hold debt. That is most likely going to change out into the future, out in 2028. So it's going to be important to understand the debt coverage ratio, the last target I'm talking about there. And the last thing I look at to determine the minimum cash is your capital improvement program. If you tell me you're going to spend, $2 million next year, I want you to have $2 million on hand so you can get the construction season going at the beginning of the year. So I determine how much minimum cash you should hold. In the water department, it's about $3 million minimum. That means I don't want you to approach the minimum. It means cash critical. So I want you to be something above that minimum. You can see in this projection that you have an aggressive capital improvement program. I believe that's already been discussed. And so that, of course, along with the losses, is currently spending down cash. We do have DWRF funding out in 2028. That's projected. That funding doesn't specifically relate to the last target I'm going to talk about, but I do want you to understand what debt coverage ratio is. Debt coverage ratio is simply a measurement of debt affordability. Did I cash flow enough from operations to pay my debt service payment at least one time? If you were going to be issuing revenue bonds for that $19 million project out in 2028, you would need to meet a 1-to-5 debt coverage ratio minimum. Now, DWRF funding doesn't have a specific debt coverage ratio, but prudent financial planning would tell you that ultimately you should be cash flowing enough from operations to pay your debt service payment once. So when you do get out into that period, we're going to want to make sure that debt coverage ratio is healthy, even though it's DWRF funding. So you can see that the current program, looking at the 3 key financial targets, the rates currently charged would not be sufficient to meet a positive operating income, to stabilize the spend down in cash, and to meet your debt coverage ratio obligation out in 2028. Do you guys have any questions on the key financial targets, why they're important, before I move on to the next page, which is going to show you a plan to kind of work these targets closer to their minimums? Okay, so I'm going to go to the next page, and we're going to talk about the next table here. What this table shows is projected or proposed rate increases of 9.9% each year for the next 5 years. You can actually see that it doesn't completely turn the losses around in the water department. I'm going to show you in a couple slides and a couple sheets that you're going to flip through that you actually in your audit have historically shown your water and wastewater department combined. So when you look at, and we're going to look at it combined in a minute here, when you show them combined, you actually show a positive operating income, and that is because the wastewater department is financially healthy, and I'm going to show you that in the next couple slides. So you may question, why are we still operating at losses even after rate increases? Why would I allow that to happen? Well, I'm going to have you look at the combined table, and you're going to see that we're going to focus kind of on that cash balance. You currently have a healthy cash balance, but with the capital improvement program that you have planned well in the past, which is allowing you to buffer higher rate increases that would be needed now. So we're actually leaning a little bit on that cash balance in order to be able to do the capital improvements we are, while keeping the rate track as low as possible to your customers. So what does a 9.9% rate increase mean to the average residential user? It's about $1.50 a month. You guys have such extremely low water rates. You currently charge $11.50 for a minimum charge, and you charge $1.85 per CCF after that. That's some of the lower rates that I've seen. Just to give you an idea, the average customer pays about $15 a month for water. The US EPA standards for water affordability right now is about $100 a month. So your water rates are very reasonable. So when although a 10% or close to 10% rate increase sounds scary, when we look at the dollar impact to the average residential customer, it's about $1.50. Now, of course, if they use more than 6 CCFs in a month, the impact will be a little bit greater. But if we want to flip to the, we'll flip in 2 pages. I'll show you dollar impact by usage. So certainly we'll take a look at that as well. But do you guys have any questions on the rate track? Yes?
Real quick, CCF, remind me what that is?
100 cubic feet.
Say that
So
again?
it's 100 cubic feet.
100 cubic feet?
So there's 700 and...
C's the Roman numeral for 100
Okay.
cubic feet.
Okay, so 100 cubic feet.
Yep.
And then the rate increase is 9.9 per year, starting in 2024 through 2028?
Correct, yes.
So $1.50, $1.51, $1.53, $1.56.
Exactly.
Okay.
It will accumulate a little bit higher each year, correct?
Okay.
Absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Yep, good question. And again, that's the average user. I'm going to show you a table where if somebody uses more, let's say sprinkling, and they use a lot more water, the dollar impact will be a little bit higher, and I'll show you that.
So one more question, I guess, real quick. What's the I was trying to figure out if it's the size of the pipe, 5/8, 1, 1.5, 2, up.
Great question. That's the size of the meter, and I do want to talk, you walked right into that, so let's go to that slide. Super great question. So right now, what you guys charge is $11.50, regardless of meter size. So what you asked about, the 5/8, the 1, 1.5, that's meter size. And you can envision when we have a larger meter, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but when we have a larger meter, it takes different distribution infrastructure to hook up to that meter. We need larger mains and so forth, which is more expensive. So typical AWWA standards are to charge progressively by meter size. The analysis, the table that you're looking at, is a very detailed analysis that I go through. It's, again, this study is about 100 spreadsheets long, where I take your relative fixed costs in the system, customer service, meter reading, billing, those types of things that don't change with usage. Those are fixed costs to the system. I mean, you're not going to fire a customer service rep because somebody didn't use water that month. So you have fixed costs there. So we try to recoup the fixed cost in that monthly customer charge. Now, there is a portion of the distribution system that falls in that customer charge. I don't want to get too deep, but it's called a minimum system analysis. I look at the minimum system you would need to build to deliver basically 1 drop of water to all your customers. That's the infrastructure that I can defend putting into the customer charge. So what we're trying to do is have the customer pay for the fixed costs in the system, and the water that they use, the more variable costs, that would be put in the commodity rate. So there's nothing wrong that you're doing. We do see flat charges like this. We do see charges based on REUs and so forth, but a more typical standard, industry standard, in a more fair way, if you will, is to charge progressively by meter size. Now, you are going to see in the next rate design, to get this first rate design through, if you will, to start turning the utility in the right direction financially, we've kept the rate structure like you currently have it. But I can give the board a very detailed analysis on if you were to move progressively by meter size, you have a lot of time to do that. You've got 4 more years of 9.9% rate adjustments to be able to do that, to move to that system. The time to do it is when you have a rate increase, because I actually look at every single customer in your system. I look at their usage. I apply the current rate that they're paying. I apply my proposed rate. And before you decide to move to that system, how everybody's affected in the system. I'm going to be honest. There's going to be winners and losers. There's going to be people that will see a slightly larger percentage increase and some that won't see as much. We don't know that until we analyze every single customer and give you that data before you make that decision. But you do have an opportunity to move to progressive charges by meter size, especially with the rate track you're looking at coming into the future. So that's what that table is showing you. That's meter size. Typical standards are to charge progressively by meter size.
What's this, a meter? I don't have water, so what is the meter size of like a residential?
It's a 5/8 inch meter.
Okay.
Yep, good question.
So the bigger the size, the more water flow they probably use. Like a factory would have a bigger size.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So 5/8 would be a residential, and then it goes up. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yep, good questions. So when we flip to the next page, it's actually showing you for this first round up for consideration of a rate increase, moving the current charge of $11.50 to $12.75, and moving the commodity rate, the CCF rate, from $1.80 to $1.97. Again, that's about $1.50 for an average residential customer. Of course, you can progressively see I used a 25 CCF, which is a very high user, most likely not a residential user unless they have a very large lawn and are sprinkling, all the way up to about a $4.70 impact. So again, the rate increase may sound scary, but the dollar impact is relatively low, and you have very reasonable water rates. Do you guys have any questions on water before we talk about wastewater?
I got a lot to
I,
Oh, sure, yeah.
Steve had his hand up first.
So you have the COS results, which shows the progressive meter monthly charge. And then when you flip the page, it has a proposed customer charge of $12.75. So is one a dream and one's what we're gonna do?
So one is if you were to charge the perfect cost of service world today, we could not move to that quickly. I could not move that quickly to the cost of service rates. When we all met, I think the thought was this first round to keep the rate structure like it is. So then we have time to analyze every single customer if the board chooses to even consider moving in that direction. Again, I'm going to ask for every single customer's usage. I'm going to apply what they've paid, and then I'm going to apply a proposed rate by progressive meter size. So the board can see, hey, do we want to do this, yes or no? Because honestly, I mean, if you do choose to move to that, and it is the more industry standard, you will see some winners and losers. And my job, I call it the art part of the rate design, my job is to keep working with that, right? I go my first go around on my proposed rate design, and if I have too many people that I feel like are impacted too greatly, I gotta go back and work that rate design, and I keep whittling it down until we're comfortable. And that could be a 5-year process. It could be a 5, 7, whatever year process. Because what we want to do is make sure we don't get complaints. I mean, I might only move some of those larger customers, $5 a year or whatever, until we can get comfortable that we're treating everybody as fairly as possible. We're not going to be able to treat everybody the same percentage basis, but we're going to be able to keep working that rate design until everybody's comfortable with it. But that takes time. And so I think the thought was, of course, we got to see if the board's even interested in finding out that data. But in the meantime, you are currently operating at losses, and we should really get something going, given especially the capital improvement program coming up. We want to be best prepared as we can be. Yes?
Okay, so I'm looking at your rate design
Yeah?
here. You were talking about changing the rates depending on the meter size, instead of doing standard, but this table just shows it was a standard. It was
Correct.
$11.50, even if you're a 5/8 inch or a 5/8 meter size compared to an 8, and then you're thinking about changing it to $12.75, and it's uniform here. So which way are we talking about?
So for the first year, we would leave your rate structure like we have it. So we could get a rate increase implemented immediately, or as soon as the board, if the board approves it. The analysis that I need to do to move, for example, we would do the analysis and be prepared in the second year, should the board approve a 9.9% in the second year, move to that type of structure in the second year. Because again, it's probably a 2-month analysis. I'm gonna go through my first reiteration. I'm gonna meet with Chuck and John and Jennifer, and we're gonna see it, are we all comfortable with this? And if we're not, I have to go back and rework it, and then we're gonna get comfortable until we bring it in front of the board. So you can certainly choose to move even in this rate design, but what it does is it'll most likely delay the rate design or rate implementation for a month or 2.
Yeah. Denise?
yes, I don't have water, so I have a well. This is all new to me. But the thing that is concerning to me is you're doing the 12.75, which is like a 9.9% increase. But when you're looking at the current rates, the monthly usage, you're going up to 10.62. So not only are they going to have a customer current charge increase, they're also going to have an increase in how much water they use.
No, so the 10.62 is for an average user, all right? So you're going to have 9.9 is what the what I'm targeting for a rate design. I'm never going to be able to, unless I took both components and exactly put 9.9% on both components, will you see a 9.9% all the way down. When you have a fixed component and a variable component, and I change those components differently, it's not going to be a straight 9.9. So the rate design that's before you, the average customer will see about a $1.48 dollar increase. Now the system as a whole, considering everybody, will see a 9.9% revenue increase. So when we talk about rate increases, it's revenue increase to the system. But individual percentages, everybody uses a different amount of water. And when you have a fixed component and a variable component, not everybody's going to be affected perfectly at 9.9%. Good question.
You want to come to the mic?
I can add just a comment. Maybe it explains it, maybe it doesn't. John DeVozo, DPW Director. You currently have an allowance of 462 cubic feet. And the 6 she's referencing is 600. So that's actually showing usage above the minimum. So a minimum with 462 cubic feet used in a month would be the 9.9%. And a lot of homeowners are at those levels. If we do a further study, we can tell you exactly which ones by address and name and everything like that. But for the most part, that allowance was set at a level where people would only have to pay the minimum in their monthly bill.
So what's, like I said, this is all new to me. So what's an average cost of a residential home to have water in Garfield Township?
The average cost is
$11.50.
$12.50.
Per month?
I'd say $11.50.
Per month to have water?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, this
Now-
is all new to me.
Now
So
that's average. So winter months, like right now well, before the last couple of days, but when it was dry, they were probably irrigating a lot. So the average monthly bill in the summer would be double that.
Okay.
Okay? But on average, a home, they use your minimum amount in a month. So one cubic foot is 7.5 gallons, so 100 cubic feet is about 750 gallons.
Okay. Thank you for
Yep.
clarifying that.
Yep.
Yeah, and John, thank you for mentioning the minimum, because also, in general, you would charge by meter size and not include any usage. Customers would pay for all usage. So what you do currently, like John said, is you charge $11.50 and include a minimum usage in that. And so most residents pay that, but in general, again, this is the art part of the whole rate design, they would pay a customer charge and they would pay a variable rate for all water used. That's typical industry standards. It's maybe about 20 to 30% of the time I see usage included in that minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
And I'm with Denise. I have a well, so this is foreign to me. So we have on the bills, there's a service charge probably that covers so much water, and then if you use above and beyond it, it's a surplus charge on your water bill?
Right now, it's $11.50, and that's
62.
462 cubic feet.
Cubic feet, okay.
It's 7.5 gallons per foot. So it's a lot of water. A lot of people will never hit that number.
And then if you go over that, you're surplus charged on your water bill, like if you're watering your garden and your plants in your yard and you're filling your pool up and.
Right.
You pay $1.80, yeah, thereafter.
$1.80 for what?
Per 100.
Okay.
Per 100, and 100 cubic feet, you said is about 750 gallons, okay.
Oh, okay,
I mean, so it'd be roughly 20% of their monthly allowance.
okay.
So, I mean, that's pretty, if somebody's bill is 100 cubic feet, that means they used 100 cubic feet more than the allowance that they got. That's a pretty significant usage of water above your normal. So, again, most of your bills in your house, even in the summer, are at the 100 or 200 cubic feet above the minimum. And you bring in some rain on average over the course of a summer, and those numbers drop.
Okay.
So the home is pretty spot on when it comes to that minimum.
But it's the sprinklers and everything else that are on top of it.
It's some
yeah,
sprinkler.
yeah.
I mean, it's
Okay.
not every day like dried out conditions trying to wet that or keep gardens growing. Those are different, just a typical home with a lawn.
Okay.
And then the meter size, I'm thinking about that, like a average home is 5'8", so restaurants are probably bigger in size, Sara Lee Factory's probably bigger in size, Metro Station 11 and 12 are probably bigger for filling tankers. So the more water usage you would have, the bigger your meter would be.
Correct.
Okay.
There's
For
industries.
firefighting, you need a bigger meter as well. So if you have a large building with sprinklers, you want,
Monster water flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
that
typically
requires-
don't meter fire lines. Fire lines are separate and pipes into the building just for pressure and volume issues. But there's set standards on, so the homeowner's meter is 5/8. We have a 5/8, 3/4, 1 inch. So those are your typical base home sizes. This system uses a 5/8 as a base size. So each meter above that is a certain proportion greater than that 5/8. So let's just say.
John, he needs you to get over
Over to the
towards the
mic.
mic.
All right,
Yeah.
we go to, if we go to 1 inch, it's like 1.5 times. So that meter will handle 1.5 times the volume of water than a 5/8. So the rate design says then this rate should be 1.5 times this one, and it goes all the way down the size of meters. And we do have up to 8-inch meters in the systems. So each one is significant. I mean, it's almost exponential how much bigger these meters are compared to the homeowner.
So if somebody builds a home, who does the study on what size a meter goes on that home's usage? How do you
There-
base that usage?
So their plumber does. We have like a little cheat sheet, spreadsheet on our application. You can even have irrigation system in your house and still maintain a 5/8 if you irrigate in zones. So we highly recommend that you do zone irrigation. That way, only one comes on at a time. If everything's on at once, you might have to go up to about a 1.5 inch. That'll handle most residential, if not all.
Okay.
Restaurants are like 2-inch meters. Myers, 4-inch meter. Sara Lee, I think, is 6 or 8. So it all depends on what type of industry you have, or what type of business you are. Most commercial buildings, offices, are 1-inch meters. So the bulk of our customers are 5/8 and 1 inch. The major bulk of our customers.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, thank you. We're naive to this.
Yeah, very much so.
We're getting a good education right now.
Which is, again, one of the reasons I think we talked about leaving the rate structure the way it is, so that we're not compounding the difficulty in explaining all of this and trying to move to meter sizes and everything at the same time, plus eliminate a water allowance, and then bring in all these capital improvements that we haven't had in the past.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, John. Any more questions on water before we move to wastewater? Yes?
I guess just for me to summarize in
Sure.
my brain. So to get to the 9.9%, we would need to switch to progressive meter size. And that would mostly affect larger businesses and commercials. And the average resident, it's just gonna be about $1.50 increase. Does that kind of summarize it
So,
properly?
for the,
Is the bulk of the increase, the bulk of the 9.9% gonna be paid for by the businesses and the bigger?
No, not necessarily. So this first year, we're just proposing keeping the rate structure the same, not moving to the progressive. Even when I move to the progressive by meter size, I'm not gonna just shove the rate design onto the larger users or the larger system.
Yeah.
I can't do that. That's not fair. That's not cost of service. What I am going to do is try to edge up. Of course, they're gonna see, they might not even see a larger percentage. They're gonna see a larger customer charge. But what happens is they use more water. So when you combine the variable portion and the fixed portion, their percentage will be about the same as a residential customer sees. So I don't want you to think we're pushing cost recovery onto the larger user just because their customer charge is going up. I'm going to manipulate the variable portion, the CCF charge, to make sure everybody in general sees a reasonable rate increase around the 9.9. Now, I said there's going to be winners and losers. So some people might see a larger increase than the 9.9, and some people might see a lesser increase than the 9.9. That's the art part of all this rate design. So although you're going to see a progressive charge by meter size, it doesn't mean the larger users are getting the bulk of the increase. Good question. Any other questions on water before we go to wastewater? Okay, let's go to wastewater, and we can always come back to water. So if we flip pages here, you will see the same summarized table, same 3 key targets: operating income, cash balances, debt coverage ratio. The wastewater department is currently healthy. You are operating at a positive income. If you actually study this table and look at that middle column, you will see that you're operating positively. In 2027, you operate at a loss, and then you see a large swing coming back up for an operating income. That looks a little odd without any rate adjustments. But what's happening there is the county has significant capital improvement planned over the next 5 years. Those capital improvement costs come to you through your treatment rate. So what that does is it'll make your operating expenses much higher for the next 5 years. Now, in 5 years, after the capital improvement program is completed, of course, what's coming through to your treatment rate is going to be much lower, and you'll hopefully see the treatment costs come back down to normal levels. That's why you see 2028 operating income spike, because by 2027, that'll be the last year of the significant capital improvements that are planned through the county that'll come through your treatment rate. So when you take all that into consideration, knowing that we swing back up with a pretty positive operating income, and we look at our cash balances, the next column, you see that actually pretty much stabilizing. Part of that is due to, obviously, the positive operating income, but the lower capital improvements in wastewater. You don't have the significant amount of capital improvements planned in wastewater that you do water. You have very, in my opinion, small capital improvements there. So, of course, that's going to help stabilize cash. So actually, in the wastewater department, and I'm going to show you a combined table after this next page here. In the wastewater, you'll see the next page, I didn't recommend a rate adjustment in wastewater. I think we need to get the water department healthy, concentrate on getting that to where it needs to be. The wastewater department is already healthy, and it can sustain the 5 years of larger treatment costs because of those capital improvements through the county. So I'm trying to get water up to where it should be while we're still watching wastewater to make sure it's healthy. So in order to see that picture fully, if you flip to the next page, you're going to see a combined summary table. This is how your audit, your audit is. It's combined water and wastewater. So when you as a board see your audit, you see a positive operating income. You don't really know fully which department is producing the income, which department is producing a loss, or are they both producing an income? And so that's what part of the study does, is it breaks that out in more detail for you. But when you look at this combined summary, you will see losses for the first 4 years. What that is, that's a function of those water losses we've already talked about, and the lower operating income in wastewater because of the higher operations and maintenance expenses due to those capital improvements. You'll see in 2028, we come back to a positive operating income altogether. The cash balance spends down somewhat. We're spending that down to about $10 million. I'm comfortable with that. You've got a healthy cash balance now. You've planned well in the past for the capital that you're facing today. If you didn't have that cash balance, you'd be faced with much higher rate increases. So you've planned well to prepare for what you're doing today. But in the same time, we're also spending down a little bit of that cash. We do need to borrow for that $19 million project, obviously in 2028 through that DWRF funding. But in the meantime, you'll see that capital improvement program is also higher, 2024 through 2026, related to the capital, the $19 million capital, and we can cash flow some of that. We don't have to borrow for that. We can cash flow some of that, spend down our current cash balance, and yet keep the water and wastewater utility healthy overall. That's what this combined summary is showing you. So overall, we need to get water healthy. And at the end of the 5-year period, we've spent down some of our cash and still have a healthy overall water and wastewater utility. Do you guys have any questions on that? Yes.
I guess I didn't know that the program, this is what Jennifer's applying for, right? Isn't gonna be till 2028 that we would get the money?
No, well,
That was kind of confusing to me.
How
Cause
that-
that's where it's on here.
So how that program works, it's stipulated for funding for 2024, but ultimately when the project's done is when you start paying on it. So it's up to a 4-year time period that they give you to use those funds and to do the project construction. So it could be sooner, but we were just kind of being conservative because there's a lot of facets to the project. So they're talking about, just like USDA or any other funding agency, when the project's done, that's when you start paying back the loan. Yeah, good question, Chloe.
There's one other aspect of it too. She says county improvements. That's because it's coming through our budget, but what we're talking about is improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. So the city has an extensive capital improvement plan for both water and sewer over the next 5 years. Sewer, it translates into direct costs we call treatment costs. So the invoices from the city actually show us what they spent in that month on that project. We pay right then and there, and that part of the debt is gone, but they have projects for the next 5 years. On the water side of things, we pay through depreciation. So we get a rate, they charge us a rate per 1,000 gallons and we have meters all throughout the township where we connect to the city. Each gallon of water that comes in, we pay for the city's costs of operating and maintaining their infrastructure, their treatment plant, and then these capital improvements that they have moving forward. So it's a little bit different. On the wastewater side, we can say they're going off the table, or they'll come off the table when they're done. On the water side, we're going to continue to pay for that, but only through depreciation. So it's a much smaller impact to us on a yearly basis. So that's why we can say like that capital improvement, those drop off after 5 years. Now, having said that, it's because I have their 5-year plan. Next year, they may add 5 years to it or have more projects that come in. That's when we call Dawn and say, hey, we need to add another few $1 million to this capital improvement over the next 5 to 10 years. What impact does that have on our rates? And then we can instantly see that and come back to you with another recommendation. But for right now, the best information we have is that this is a 5-year plan and the improvements are done and these costs are going to come out of the budget. Yep.
Do you guys have any other questions? It's a lot of information, I know.
I'm assuming we can contact you if we do, right?
Absolutely, yes,
Okay.
for sure. Well, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank
And
you
of course,
so
if you have any
much.
questions, make sure and let me know. I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks for answering the people that don't have water, because I don't understand it.
So just to make things a little more interesting.
Oh, stop it.
Everything that we charge and all the procedures we use is part of a water and sewer ordinance. So in order to make this change, we're going to have to change the
this
ordinance.
Okay,
So it's not going to happen real fast.
okay.
There'll be a little bit more process involved there.
Is that something that we can look at in the near future? I mean, by
I'd like to
bringing.
look at it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I was gonna say sooner than better, sooner than later.
Yes.
Okay,
start getting healthier quicker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
John?
If I may. In regards to the ordinance, so we started the rate study in 2018. We were just getting started when COVID hit, so we basically lost 2 years because you can't have and develop these things over a video camera. It has to be in person. You have to look at the numbers. You have to understand what we're looking at and why. At the same time, we also hired through the BPW a law firm to take a look at our ordinances. So that work has all been completed. If all the townships maintain the same rate methodology, which is what it sounds like what we're going to do, then that ordinance is like 99.9% complete already. We'll bring it back probably in final completion to the BPW to make sure we hammer things out and then bring a recommendation to you. But we should be able to do this in time for you to do your next rate increase. I'm assuming it's going to be later in the year or it's going to be for 2024. So we'll have time to do that. So you currently have an ordinance that requires rate increases by ordinance. That requires an amendment to your ordinance. It's a big deal. What we are proposing is that we come through, because you have the authority to have an ordinance that gives you the authority to set rates by resolution. So we're proposing that you modify the way you do things to say, we're going to change our rates by resolution, and then it's much easier for you to take in information and make a quicker impact to the systems that you're operating, and you're not hindered by the bureaucracy of those ordinance amendments. Not to mention, I have two big we call them the green book. There's actually two of them for Garfield that we have like 50 amendments to your ordinance, and it's just a lot to keep track of. So there's a way to streamline this. We also have more than one ordinance for both water and sewer. We're trying to combine water into one ordinance that includes all the peripheral ordinances, and then one for sewer as well. So we think we've done that, but we need you to set the rate or come up with the rate methodology, because we're required to put that language in the ordinance to reflect your methodology.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay, so, and you're not the only township we're waiting on. East Bay, who happened to be the first one we tackled, is still yet to take on their rates. And we're doing Elmwood in July, and then we'll just be waiting on East Bay after that.
Peninsula is done.
Peninsula's done. Peninsula, Acme, Elmwood will be in July, and then Garfield. It sounds like we're moving in that direction, so I'm hopeful from what I'm hearing at the meeting today. So Garfield, I would consider to be, we can check you off the list as you're going to make a decision one way or another. In East Bay is the only one left that we'd have to get a commitment on the methodology is really what we're looking for. Once we get that, then it's just language changes in the ordinance, and that's done.
I think Steve had a question.
So the ordinance, I don't know how it's written today, but the new one that's going to be written will allow us to cover changes with resolutions. Can we implement increases at any time, or is there certain times of the year you can only do it?
You can do it anytime.
Okay.
Well, it depends on how you write the ordinance.
Yeah.
Right. So it could state at any point.
Yeah, it'll say you have the authority to modify these rates from time to time, but it's through resolution.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some very interesting software that's out there now where you can put all of your data into a computer program, and it will tell you minute by minute where you're headed and what would happen if you raise the rate 10 cents. You know, how that'll affect it over a period of years. So we'll be in a better position, and we'll get rid of some of the awkwardness of the ordinance process we have now. So I think that's all good. Molly?
So, each of these municipalities, Peninsula, Acme, Elmwood, East Bay, and us, are we all looking at the same rates and the same thing, and we all have to pass it separately? And
You're looking at the same rate methodology, but each township has a different amount for the rate. Everybody is still charging a minimum flat charge and a commodity rate per 100 cubic feet. So far, the ones that have applied increases per the rate studies that we did, they have maintained that methodology.
But it's not all the same rate?
They're not all the same. Nope,
Can't
each
be.
system is different based on the costs and historical rate increases and historical capital improvements or modifications to the system.
Each system's different in every
Yep,
township.
yep.
Right. We're on surface water out of the lake. East Bay is well water, Blair is well water,
Timberley.
and they have additional costs with that. So it's an interesting,
So you
We'll give
can't
you-
have the same rate for everybody.
No, they all have different infrastructure needs, different customer base, different usage per customer base and stuff like that. We didn't talk about them tonight, but benefit charges are another revenue that you have in the system. Some don't have nearly anywhere near what you bring in benefit charges either. So that helps your bottom line, but it doesn't offset. What we did was a cost of service on the operations portion of things. They're all different, they're all within the realm of affordability according to the EPA. So you're all between $11.50 and $50 a month.
Okay.
I got one more, and this might be for Dawn. The 9.9, you had to play with the numbers to find the sweet spot. Was that the sweet spot? I mean, I'm thinking like, why didn't we go 10.5 or something like that?
Certainly, we could have gone higher. I try to keep it under double digits. I'm just going to be honest. It just sounds better if you keep it under that double digit.
$799.99
Exactly.
versus 800.
Yep.
Yep. So
Yep.
it's 7, not the
I
8.
just wondered. So yeah, so you're gonna basically, if we do the 9.9, we're gonna keep everything 9.9, and then we're gonna kind of monitor the system and see what that effect does before we would implement the meter size charging possibly.
So my recommendation would be, if you want to implement the 9.9, to then start doing the work to figure out moving to the system by meter size. It buys us a little bit of time to do that, and
Okay.
for you to really analyze the data. You will literally have data and be able to look down your customer list and see how every single customer is affected
And you
before
don't
you make a
want-
decision.
You don't want to do that right away, right? Let's give this one increase first and then look at,
well, yeah, the one increase is gonna be an ordinance.
right,
So we'd like to ideally get through the ordinance changes as
Right.
quickly as possible.
can we get, is it asking a lot to do it by next meeting?
We may have a proposal in front of you for the next meeting, but then
Okay.
that will lead us to
Right.
publication and
Right.
a public
Hearings and-
hearing.
Yeah.
So if you have a proposal by next meeting, we can get the ball rolling then?
I believe we could.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. There are no more questions or comments regarding water and sewer rates. We will move on to consideration of a revised agreement with the Traverse Area Pickleball Association, or TAPA, for the pickleball courts at Boardman Valley Nature Preserve. And John's the lead on this one.
Sure, and obviously Denise can chime in on this, but this was, if you recall, once the pickleball courts were completed a few years ago, there was an agreement between the township and the Traverse Area Pickleball Association to allow for a process to reserve court space on there. So they operate a software program where people can reserve times for some portion of the courts. Others are first come, first served, but so there was this agreement that was established. The agreement expired, so this is now, as recommended by the Parks and Rec Commission, a new agreement, updated, but it would have an open-end date, so it doesn't have to keep coming back. I think we put a date initially just because it was the starting of this relationship with the association, and we just didn't want it to be ongoing. Also, there was a slight adjustment in terms of the timing, so that of those slots that people could reserve court space on there, that's been adjusted for the start time is ideally at 8 a.m. There was a part where people wanted it for that time or later, so they were double booking even though they weren't using the full time. So that's been adjusted and reflected in the policy.
So, like John said, we had talked about this at length at the Parks and Rec meeting, and I think initially we put that date in there because this was new to us. And it seems to be working out, and we had asked, it was written up a different way at our Parks and Recs, but we had asked to remain in place until either party wishes to terminate, as described in the termination number 6. We had them add that, the termination on number 6, because it explains everything on that. So at that point in time, it doesn't mean that we can't terminate this at any time if we have just cause. But I don't think a date is needed in there because it seems to be working out fine.
Do we need to have terminology of changes too? I mean, not only termination, but at any point either party can change the agreement? It says shall
Well, if there's
remain
any
in place until either party wishes to terminate. Well, what if they want to change?
Well, any changes would still
That
have to
would
come
be
in front.
mutual.
Yeah, it would have to come in front of our board, yeah,
By request of either one?
right.
Yeah, and
Right.
typically, we would ask the Parks and Rec Board to review it
Okay.
because they're closer to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And Chuck, I had one more question. From what I understand on this right up here, it looks like the only reservation courts are 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4 are always left as an open play court. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. So
That's
only
right.
half can be reserved, the other half are come and goes.
Correct.
Okay, that's good.
Half that are reserved are only reserved half the time.
Oh, are they?
Yeah,
So we're feeling like we've got plenty of pickleball courts out there with these.
well, we're still getting at the Parks and Rec constantly asking for pickleball courts at Silver Lake. And it's like you've got a lot of them around here right now.
Okay.
And like Chuck said, half of them aren't reserved half the time. You know, I think it was a big push at the beginning, but now they're finding that they're not all reserved.
Are we doing any at River East?
We don't have that in the plans at this point, but
No.
it's potentially there. There's a couple of organizations that are opening pay-for-play courts.
Mm-hmm.
So which it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in the weeds a little bit.
Okay.
So, a few people have approached me about this, and they're telling me, and I don't know anything about this, but they're telling me that modifications to a basketball court can easily be made, or not basketball, but a tennis court, can easily be made to do pickleball.
Nope.
You cannot.
Well, the thing is we just painted the tennis court in Silver Lake. We would have to repaint it again because the lines are different in pickleball.
Yeah, but you could have both.
We would have to install some kind of pegs in the asphalt to pull the net down
Right.
to the lower height for pickleball.
And the lines are different, because we talked about that, the lines are different, and we just painted that.
Yeah,
For
but you could
tennis.
leave what you have there, and could you add whatever lines you need for pickleball to what's already there?
What we're tentatively considering is adding more courts at Silver Lake and having pickleball there in addition to tennis, rather than take it away from tennis.
Right.
To give it to pickleball.
Yeah, we don't want to take
I
it away.
understand people who play pickleball want it right now.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want to pay anything.
Yeah,
Well,
and
that's true.
the thing is, and we had found at the Parks and Rec Commission, that there's a lot of people like to play tennis, you know, and why should we give up a tennis court for pickleball when there's a lot more pickleball courts around than there is tennis courts?
Just tennis courts, yeah.
If we want to do something in the future to put a pickleball court up there, fine, or put one at River East. But right now, we need to look out for the people that play tennis, not just pickleball.
Yeah, are they busy? I mean,
Yeah.
you've kind of,
Mm-hmm.
the tennis, when I go by, I see them
Yep.
there, but, okay.
And I personally think all the lines on the multiple use courses are confusing to the athletes.
Yep.
You go into a gym and they have the volleyball lines painted out there and the basketball lines painted out there and whatever other god sport there is. You're like, well, you were on the line. Well, that's a pickleball line. That's not a tennis line. So I think you end up, it gets to be too cluttered.
I agree with you, Steve.
Yeah, I think it would be cleaner just to add a few more courts, and that's the long-range goal.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I would like to make a motion
Yes, ma'am?
that the revised agreement with TAPA for pickleball courts at Boardman Valley Nature Preserve, as attached to the Planning Department's report 2023-73, be implemented. Support.
We have a motion and support to adopt the new revised agreement with TAPA. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. And the last new business is consideration of cost sharing the driveway repair for YMCA / pickleball / Boardman Valley Nature Preserve. So the driveway out there is floating on top of
Buck.
muck and plant material, peat, I think they call it. They patched it up to the tune of $12,252. YMCA was in a situation where they felt it just had to be done right away, and then they came asking us if we wanted to split the cost, and an analysis shows that the pickleballers use it pretty heavily for 4 months. And then the Boardman Valley Nature Preserve is a light usage. The YMCA tends to be a very heavy usage through, all 4 seasons, but particularly spring, winter, and fall. So the recommendation is that we would pay a third and reimburse them for that.
Are the other 2/3 being split between anybody, or is
The other
Y
2/3
picking
is,
it up?
the entire thing has already been paid by the YMCA,
Oh, okay.
so we would just reimburse them for a third.
So this work is done?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sure, I'll make a motion that the township contribution in the amount of $4,084 to the repairs of the Racket Club Drive be approved.
Support.
We have a motion and support to cover the 1/3 share as presented. Any questions or comments?
This is like putting the cart before the horse. I mean, they went ahead and paid for it, and then they're asking us money for it. I mean,
Yeah, and they were asking us to pay half too. But it is I think the situation was, when the spring came, the road was really, really bad. I mean, it was, like, one side was impossible to drive on. Elmer's had indicated that they had some openings on their schedule early in the season and they could get it done. And allegedly, they gave them a good price. It's hard
oh,
to-
I understand that, but I think it would have been nice if they would have come to us first and said, this is what we're planning on doing. If you can help, we'd appreciate it, rather than, afterwards.
Yeah. They say typically they were in a hurry. They wanted to get it done, and it was a limited opportunity.
It's because those pickleball players want to play pickleball.
They do.
So are we expecting that this issue is going to keep coming up because it's on peat? Remember Elmwood Street used to go all the way through
Yes.
Silver Lake?
Yep, it's the same kind of situation. It just keeps sinking.
Yeah.
Like my road lately.
And we're encouraging, the Y has they've started their fundraising for the expansion of the new Y. And their long-term is still to abandon the YMCA on the river. And then we would probably sell or move the building. So at this point, it's just stabilized and kind of limping along, but we keep encouraging them to.
Yeah.
We feel like we've already met our goal of keeping them there a long time ago.
Yeah.
We talked one time that Buckley Steam Engine Show
Yep.
was interested in the building.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Be another perk.
So we do have a motion and support.
Yep.
And could we have a roll call vote, please?
Gustinelli.
Yes.
Dool.
Yes.
McCumber.
Yes.
Schmuckel.
Yes.
Corn.
Yes. And that brings us back to public comment.
Did you get a road commission report?
Yes, we did.
Two of them.
Two of them, actually.
Two of
Nothing
them.
new on roadkill, though. We don't have any of that.
There's nothing to share.
Is there any other business to come before the board today? Would there be any objection to adjourning?
No.
Stand adjourned. Thank you.